Never been a shark attack in these waters.
Something feels off.
Now, I'm with you, Tina. What's up with the cage?
Why are you doing this?
Revenge.
The movie begins with Roy mourning the loss of his wife. Looking out at the ocean, he recalls the day she was taken from him. One moment she was there, and the next, she was gone. The story then flashes back 5 years earlier. Roy and his wife, Nikki, are enjoying a vacation by the ocean. Nikki jumps into the water and calls for Roy to hurry up. Roy reminds her that she is the one who asked for more wine. Moments later, their peaceful day turns into a nightmare when a great white shark suddenly attacks Nikki. Within seconds, the water around her turns crimson. Hearing her screams, Roy desperately calls out her name and rushes to help her. But by the time he reaches her, it is already too late. All he finds are the remains of his wife, leaving him devastated as the ocean takes away the person he loves most. A news report mentions that shark attacks have been increasing in recent years as fish migrate toward warmer waters, creating new hunting grounds for predators. The story then shifts to the beautiful island of Malta, where Tina is celebrating her wedding with family and friends. Her father gives an heartfelt speech. He admits that when Tina first told him about Tom, he was a little suspicious because he seemed almost too perfect. However, his doubts disappeared during a trekking trip when Tina injured her leg and Tom carried her the entire way back. According to him, that was when he realized Tom's intentions were genuine and not just an act. He goes on to say how proud he is of Tina for growing into a kind, ambitious woman who always stands up for what she believes in. He ends his speech by reminding the newlyweds that marriage is never easy, but it is worth fighting for. Then, Tina and Tom head off for a wedding photo shoot. Although they smile for the camera, there seems to be some unspoken tension between them. Later, Tina shares a dance with her father. He then gives her a special gift. When Tina opens it, she finds a bracelet engraved with the words, "Never give up on love." Deeply moved by the gesture, she hugs her father and thanks him. The next morning, Tom wakes up on the beach and returns to the hotel. Tina tells him they need to talk, but Tom insists he has nothing to say and heads off to take a shower. Before they can continue their argument, a knock at the door interrupts them. Outside are their friends, Rick and Richinda, who excitedly tell them they have a surprise wedding gift waiting for them. Tom asks for a moment, and the group agrees to meet outside. A short while later, everyone gathers together as Rick reveals the surprise, a catamaran trip. Tina and Tom immediately hesitate. Tina points out that she gets seasick and cannot swim, worrying about what might happen if she falls into the ocean. Rick brushes off her concerns, joking that Tom would simply jump in and save her. After plenty of persuasion from their friends, the couple eventually agrees to come along. Once aboard, the captain introduces himself as Mackie and welcomes everyone on board. He assures the group that if they need anything during the trip, he will be happy to help. Brittany jokingly asks whether he would rescue her if she fell into the ocean. Mackie replies that it is his duty to help, but advises everyone to stay on the boat and away from the water whenever possible. Brittany quickly brings up sharks, saying that's exactly why she has no intention of jumping into the ocean. In response, Mackie reassures the group that there have been no shark attacks in the area. After that, everyone settles in and begins enjoying the trip. Some relax on the deck, while others dive into the ocean for a swim. The group spends the next few hours drinking, chatting, and having fun together as the catamaran sails across the open water. Later, Tina approaches Tom and asks what he is trying to do. Tom says he is simply enjoying the sea air. Tina points out that they have been at each other's throats lately and asks if he is really ready to give up on their marriage. Tom admits he has thought about it a lot and believes they want different things in life. Although Tina insists they can make it work, Tom says he loves her but needs time to think before walking away. Not long afterward, Tina becomes seasick and heads inside after throwing up. There, she unexpectedly catches Rick kissing Richinda. Rick quickly excuses himself and leaves, while Richinda brushes it off, saying not everyone is lucky enough to find a man like Tom. Sensing that something is wrong, Richinda asks if Tina is okay. Tina admits that she is not, and the two sit down to talk. Moments later, Tina's sister Sadie joins them and asks what is going on. After some hesitation, Tina reveals that she and Tom are planning to get an annulment. Shocked by the news, Sadie asks what happened. Tina explains that the situation is partly her fault. She was recently offered a major opportunity involving Gopak, a company seeking drilling leases in Alaska. The job could fast-track her career, but Tom has spent years campaigning against companies like Gopak. Tina says she always dreamed of changing the world alongside him, but Tom tends to see things in black and white. making it difficult for them to find common ground. Sadie responds that maybe it is for the best. Tina then asks Richinda to give them a moment. After she leaves, Tina asks Sadie why she is always rooting against her. Sadie replies that Tom is simply too kind and too moral. Meanwhile, Richinda finds Rick secretly listening in on their conversation and calls him out for eavesdropping. A moment later, Brittany walks over and asks what is going on. Rick casually reveals that Tina and Tom are getting an annulment. Just then, Tina arrives and asks if Richinda told them. Richinda quickly denies it, making it clear that Rick was the one listening in on the conversation. Before the discussion can continue, the catamaran suddenly jolts, throwing everyone off balance. Captain Mackey quickly reassures the group that there is nothing to worry about, explaining that they have simply hit a rock. Later, Brittany checks on Tina before approaching Tom and asking if he is okay. Tom replies that news travels fast. Brittany tells him that if he needs someone to talk to, she is there for him. But Tom says he would rather be alone. Not long afterward, the catamaran is suddenly rocked by a violent impact. A massive great white shark has attacked the boat, causing it to jolt violently. When the anchor is dragged into the water, Captain Mackey tries to pull it back up. Tom steps in to help, but the weight proves too much, sending Mackey into the ocean. While Tom slips to the side, the group panics as Captain Mackey disappears beneath the water. Moments later, he resurfaces, and Richinda quickly throws him a life ring. As he desperately swims back toward the catamaran, the shark suddenly attacks and tears into his leg. Despite the horrific injury, he manages to climb back aboard, bleeding heavily. Barely able to speak, he mutters a single word, "Shark." As the group tries to stop the bleeding, Tina heads for the radio, only to discover that it is damaged and the signal is too weak to call for help. At the same time, Brittany finds a distress flare launcher. Before she can use it, another impact shakes the boat, causing the launcher to slip from her hand and fall into the engine compartment. The chaos gets even worse when Tina loses her footing and falls into the ocean. Without hesitation, Tom jumps in after her. As the shark closes in on them, an arrow suddenly strikes it, driving it away. Everyone turns to see a man aboard a nearby boat who reaches out and pulls Tina and Tom to safety. Meanwhile, the flare launcher ignites inside the engine compartment, setting the catamaran on fire. With the flames spreading rapidly, everyone abandons ship and swims toward the stranger's boat. Moments later, the catamaran is engulfed in flames before sinking beneath the waves. Brittany blames herself for what happened, but Richinda assures her it was only an accident. The stranger identifies the shark as a great white, though Tom finds it hard to believe one would be in the area. Wanting to go home, Tina asks if he can take them back to their resort. The man refuses, explaining that a storm is approaching the coast and that it would be too dangerous. Rick argues that they can make it back before the storm arrives, but the man quickly shuts him down. Tom then steps in and tells him they can go wherever he is headed. The stranger explains that he is traveling south to a port around the bend, where they will be able to find their way back to the resort. After thanking him, the group agrees to go along. As they settle in, Rick remarks how strange it is that the man appeared out of nowhere. Tina admits that something about him feels off, and Rick agrees, pointing out the huge cage on his boat. Richinda, however, insists they are overthinking things since he just saved their lives. A short while later, the man returns with food for everyone and jokes that it is not exactly a luxury buffet before finally introducing himself as Roy. Tina thanks Tom for saving her. Tom asks if she really thinks he would let her die just because their marriage is falling apart. Tina says the ordeal has put things into perspective and makes her believe they can still work things out. Tom, however, admits that ever since her new career opportunity came along, he has felt like he is losing her to her ambition. Tina argues that he has family money to fall back on if things go wrong. While Tom insists he supports her career, Tina disagrees, claiming he always sees things in a rigid black and white way. She says she was even willing to give up her ambition for him, but never brought it up because she felt her opinion meant nothing to him. Hurt by her words, Tom walks away. Watching the argument from a distance, Roy approaches Tina and tries to talk to her. Tina refuses at first, pointing out that he is a stranger and that these issues are difficult to discuss. Roy tells her that he was once married as well and that marriage is hard, but worth fighting for. When Tina asks about his wife, Ron replies that she is somewhere in the ocean waiting for him. As Roy walks away, he passes Tom and tells him that people never truly realize the value of something until they lose it. Meanwhile, Rick grows increasingly suspicious and confronts Ron, asking where they are headed since he has not seen any land for hours. He even asks to see the GPS and maps, but Ron dismisses his concerns, insisting that he knows these waters well and telling Rick to sit down. Not long afterward, Sadie suddenly begins feeling drowsy. One by one, the others start feeling the same way and eventually lose consciousness. As they drift off, Ron calmly tells them to get some rest because tomorrow is going to be a long day. The next morning, Tina wakes up to find her hands tied. Looking around, she realizes everyone else has been restrained as well. Worse, Brittany has been locked inside the massive cage Roy had been carrying on his boat. As the group wakes up in panic, Roy remains completely focused on the cage, Rick desperately tries to reason with him, even offering him money, but Roy ignores him. Instead, he approaches Brittany and makes a small cut on her arm, letting her blood drip into the water below. To everyone's horror, Roy then lowers the cage into the ocean. Moments later, a shark attacks the cage. Roy fires at it, forcing it to back away before pulling the cage back up. Terrified, Brittany screams that there is a shark in the water, but Roy simply lowers her back down. When the shark attacks again, Roy misses his shot. Amid the chaos, Brittany frees herself, unlocks the cage, and swims toward the surface. Everyone desperately calls for her to get back to the boat. Before she can make it, the shark attacks, tearing her apart and leaving the group horrified. Roy, however, shows no sympathy, simply calling it a waste before asking who wants to go next. Tina soon notices that Richinda is vomiting and appears to be having a severe allergic reaction. Demanding answers, she asks Roy what he gave them. Roy checks on Richinda and remarks that she still has a little life left in her. When Tina begs him to let her help, Roy refuses. He insists that the cage is safer than the water and claims that if they do exactly as he says, at least some of them might make it home alive. Tom then asks why he is doing all of this. Roy reveals that it is all about revenge. He explains that few years ago, a shark killed his wife, and he has been hunting it ever since. According to Roy, he tagged the shark and spent years trying to lure it back with bait. When dead fish stopped working, he moved on to larger animals. He believes that once a shark gets a taste for human flesh, something changes in it forever. Roy claims he chased the shark across the Pacific, but it eventually moved north. Puzzled by the sudden change, he admits he never understood why. Tom explains that warmer ocean temperatures caused by climate change may have driven it into new waters, but Roy says the reason no longer matters. When Tina asks why he chose them, Roy laughs and admits that he had originally been looking for drifting homeless people. Instead, he stumbled across their burning boat and found an entire group of victims. Lucky for him, but not for them. Tina tells Roy that he is a weak man hiding behind his grief. Furious, Roy grabs her. Tom quickly offers himself instead, hoping to protect Tina, but Roy starts forcing Tina toward the cage anyway. Just then, a Coast Guard vessel appears in the distance. The group is immediately relieved, but Roy quickly covers them up and warns that he will kill them if anyone makes a sound. He then points a gun at Sadie and orders Tina to send the officers away. When the Coast Guard arrives, the officers ask whether they have seen a missing catamaran carrying 7 people. Under pressure, Tina claims she is simply on a fishing trip with her brother and has not seen another boat. However, one of the officers suddenly spots a severed arm floating in the water. Before she can react, Roy shoots her. Tina immediately starts screaming that Roy is a psychopath who has been holding them captive. The second officer fires back, but Roy dodges the shot. The officer then boards the vessel and tries to restrain Roy, but Roy overpowers him and throws him into the ocean. Moments later, the shark attacks and kills him. Tom immediately attacks Roy, but Roy throws him aside and grabs his weapon. Rick then charges at Roy, only to be shot. As Rick begs for his life, Roy backs off and walks away. A few moments later, Tom attacks Roy again, leading to a brutal fight between the two men. Eventually, Roy gains the upper hand and knocks Tom into the ocean. When Tom fails to resurface, Tina is left in shock. Roy orders her to sit down and warns that if she does not keep quiet, she will join him. After tying her up, he goes to start the boat, but the engine refuses to cooperate. Roy heads below deck to check the engine. When he comes back, Rick suggests that they work together to get rid of the shark. Roy responds by angrily slamming a knife into a nearby barrel and ordering him to keep quiet. At the same time, Sadie tries to comfort Tina, telling her not to give up. She admits that she has always envied Tina's freedom and her ability to live life on her own terms. Once the engine finally starts, Roy heads toward Richinda. Sensing an opportunity, Tina distracts him by asking about his wife and whether she would have wanted any of this revenge. Roy pauses and admits that she would not. Using the distraction, Richinda throws herself into the ocean and starts swimming away. Roy immediately opens fire, but she manages to avoid the shots. Enraged, Roy drives the boat straight at her, pulling her into the propeller and tearing her apart. As Roy watches the water turn red, he coldly tells Tina that her plan did not exactly work out. Roy starts the boat and continues following the shark's tracking signal. Meanwhile, memories of her father and Tom come rushing back to Tina. Realizing she cannot give up, she quietly tells Sadie to grab the knife while she watches for Roy. Sadie manages to reach the knife and cuts Tina free. Tina then tells her to look after Rick before launching a surprise attack on Roy. However, Roy sees it coming and dodges it. A violent struggle breaks out, and Roy eventually gains the upper hand and begins choking Tina. Using the bracelet, Tina fights back while Rick and Sadie join the fight. Suddenly, a shark bursts from the water and drags Rick off the boat. As everyone watches in horror, Roy casually asks who wants to go into the cage next. Tina immediately volunteers, prompting Roy to sarcastically remark, "How sweet." Meanwhile, Tom regains consciousness and swims through the open water until he reaches the dead Coast Guard officer's boat. Using the radio, He manages to contact help and report what happened before starting the boat and heading back toward the others. At the same time, Roy locks Tina inside the cage and lowers it into the ocean. The shark immediately attacks, violently slamming into the cage. During the attack, the cage breaks loose and sinks deeper into the water. Back on the boat, Sadie taunts Roy, telling him that for a shark hunter, he is not very good at his job. Furious, Roy grabs her and throws her into the ocean. Sadie desperately swims back toward the boat as the shark closes in behind her. Below the surface, Tina manages to open the cage, but before she can escape, she begins to black out from lack of oxygen. Just then, Tom arrives and pulls her to safety. Shocked to discover that he is still alive, Tina follows him back to the boat. As the shark appears once again, Tina grabs a knife and leaps onto its back, stabbing it repeatedly. Taking advantage of the moment, Roy opens fire and wounds the shark. Believing he has finally won, Roy proudly declares that he finally got it. With everyone back aboard, Tina, Tom, and Sadie work together to take down Roy. As they struggle to restrain him, the wounded shark resurfaces and violently rocks the boat. Roy manages to regain control of his gun and points it at them. But Tom tells him that he already got what he wanted because the shark is dying. Roy disagrees, insisting that the shark does not die easily, and neither do they. Moments later, Tina distracts Roy and knocks him overboard. As Roy desperately begs for help, Tina tells Sadie to push the throttle forward. The boat surges ahead, leaving Roy behind. Tina watches as the shark finally returns and tears Roy apart. Later, Tom returns Tina's bracelet to her. Tina smiles and tells him she knew he would find his way back to her. Not long afterward, the Coast Guard arrives and rescues the survivors. Sometime later, Tina appears in a news interview discussing the recent shark attacks. She explains that changing ocean temperatures caused by climate change are pushing marine life into new territories and argues that companies like GoPack continue to ignore the environmental damage they create. She ends by saying that maybe, together, people can still make a difference.